Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you enjoy a positive story, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any updates. Today, I'm going to share something I've never told anyone before. A story about a hidden truth, an unexpected connection, and how one moment in the kitchen changed everything. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm 22 years old. A few months ago, my mother remarried a man named Hudson, and my life changed completely. We relocated to a new town and settled into a spacious house populated by unfamiliar faces. My mother and I were no longer alone. I had a new family, Hudson. He was amazing, kind, and welcoming, but despite his warmth, I often felt like an outsider, as if I didn't quite fit in. And then there was my stepbrother, Gabriel, who was 23. He had a quiet, brooding charm that was difficult to resist. He was passionate. He was passionate about photography and would frequently disappear with his camera to capture moments from his surroundings. He emanated a sense of mystery, seemingly engrossed in contemplation, giving the impression of perceiving things beyond the reach of others. He wasn't cold or unkind, but there was something mysterious about him, as if he was keeping something hidden, possibly his emotions. I, too, was dealing with my own challenges. Leaving my old life, friends, and even my boyfriend in the city proved more difficult than I had anticipated. The relationship had been unstable for months, but the simultaneous move and breakup felt overwhelming. Stay tuned. This is just the beginning of a story that is changing my life in unexpected ways. I frequently felt lonely, retreating into my own world, either reading or watching TV. But everything changed one fateful night in the kitchen. It was late, around midnight, and the house was quiet and dark, with everyone else sound asleep. My mind was racing with thoughts of home and the life I'd left behind. I decided to make myself a cup of tea, hoping it would help me relax. I crept down the stairs, taking care not to wake anyone. The streetlight's glow softly illuminated the kitchen, casting gentle shadows throughout. I placed the kettle on the stove and leaned against the counter, gazing at the rising steam. The silence was soothing and a welcome break from my thoughts. Suddenly, I felt a presence behind me. I turned, startled, to see Gabriel standing in the doorway. His hair was disheveled, and his eyes remained heavy due to sleep. He seemed surprised to see me. "Can't sleep?" he asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper in the silence. I managed a small smile. I thought some tea might help. "I apologize if I awoke you." He shook his head and stepped into the room. "You didn't. I was already awake." He reached for a glass of water, and for a brief moment, we stood side by side in silence, feeling the electric tension in the air. The warmth emanating from him made my heart race just slightly faster. His gaze lingered on me. "You seem a little different here." I looked at him in surprise as he made a comment, almost as if he was thinking aloud. He responded differently, sipping his water quietly, as if he was lost in his own thoughts. I sighed and nodded. Moving here and leaving everything behind is a lot to take on. I honestly feel lost. He listened quietly, and it felt beneficial to share my feelings with someone who was not familiar with the messy details of my past life. He didn't say anything, but his expression conveyed a gentle understanding, encouraging me to open up without overthinking it. I leaned against the counter and looked up at him. "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something but aren't sure what it is?" He held my gaze, nodding slowly. Every day we stood there, enveloped in each other's eyes, the silence thick with unspoken feelings. I could feel my pulse quicken, warmth flooding my cheeks. There was something palpable between us, something both unspoken and undeniable. Then, almost instinctively, he stepped closer, his hand resting on the counter beside mine for a moment. I didn't understand what was happening. It felt like a movie. His fingers brushed against mine lightly, tentatively testing the waters with my breath caught, and I looked up to find him gazing down at me. His eyes were dark and intense. My heart raced, and every nerve in my body awoke, fully aware of him in a way that felt entirely new to Elizabeth. He whispered, his voice low and uncertain, yet he didn't pull away. I felt an irresistible pull toward him, drawn into that quiet intensity. I leaned in just enough to close the distance between us, and his hand found mine, fingers intertwining in a silent acknowledgement of the connection we both felt but hadn't dared to voice before. Before I knew it, he was leaning down, his lips just inches from mine. My mind screamed at me to pull back, to stop before we crossed a line that would change everything, but my heart urged me to stay, to discover where this moment might lead to. For once, I listened to my heart when our lips finally met. It was soft and tentative, both of us fearing we might shatter the spell, but that initial touch was electric, sending shivers racing down my spine. It felt so right, so natural. After that night, everything changed as if predestined. We both knew what happened between us, but didn't talk about it. Instead, it became our little secret, something we cherished in those quiet, stolen moments when no one else was around. Sometimes, I would find myself in the kitchen again, late at night, hoping he'd join me, and he always did, as if he sensed my anticipation. We'd sit together, engaged in soft conversation, sharing laughter and secrets. And when the house was silent and we were sure no one was watching, we'd steal kisses in the gentle glow of the kitchen light, our hands intertwined. Hearts racing, our bond deepened with every passing night. We'd sneak into each other's rooms quietly. As we climbed through the balcony to avoid detection, our conversations grew more intimate with each passing evening, our touches lingering just a bit longer, our whispered words filled with significance. It was exhilarating and terrifying. At the same time, we were both acutely aware of the risks of what others might say if they found out. But in those hidden quiet moments, it was just us two souls who had unexpectedly found each other. He became my confidant, my best friend, and something more while I became his. Our evenings together were filled with laughter, stolen kisses, and whispered dreams, each moment affirming the bond we shared. Every moment felt like a beautiful secret we held from the world, a fragile yet profound connection that belonged solely to us. As the weeks progressed, our connection only intensified. We continued to sneak into each other's rooms, carefully traversing the balcony. To remain unseen each night, our conversations grew deeper, our hands lingering longer, our touches gentle yet infused with urgency in the solitude of the night. Away from prying eyes, it was just the two of us. We talked for hours. Until dawn threatened to break, we shared secrets that no one else could understand, enveloped in the warmth of those stolen moments. However, one afternoon, everything changed. I was lounging in the living room, mindlessly scrolling through my phone when the doorbell rang. I was surprised to see Caleb, my ex-boyfriend, standing there with a hopeful grin. He had driven down from the city, wanting to talk things through and hoping we could possibly reconcile. His sudden arrival took me by surprise, and I didn't know how to respond. Part of me felt that familiar attachment resurfacing, but I could feel Jacob's gaze on me from across the room, his expression unreadable. Caleb entered, taking my hand and leading me to the couch. I noticed Jacob's jaw tight as he observed us from the kitchen, a dark cloud of emotion. With his face crossed, I could feel the tension in the room as Caleb spoke, trying to explain why he had come. However, Jacob's words consumed my thoughts, making it difficult for me to concentrate later that evening. Later that evening, when Caleb had left, I found Jacob waiting for me in the kitchen, his eyes stormy, his arms crossed, and his gaze fixed on me. The usual warmth in his gaze was replaced by something more intense. Without uttering a word, he grabbed his jacket and motioned for me. To follow him outside, we walked in. I didn't know where we were heading, but I trusted him, sensing that he needed to escape the house away from the memories of Caleb's visit. After driving for a while, we arrived at a tranquil, secluded spot by the lake. The moonlight cast a soft glow over the water, and the air was filled with the sounds of crickets and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. He parked the car, and we sat in silence. For a moment before he finally spoke, his voice low and serious. "Why didn't you tell me he was coming?" His words were steady, but I could feel the hurt behind them. "I didn't know, Jake. He just showed up," I replied, reaching for his hand. "You know it's over with him." I could see the tension in his body as he looked away, his hand still tense in mine. "Seeing him with you made me realize that I can't keep this a secret anymore. I don't want to. I want both you and everyone else to know about it." My heart raced at his declaration, my chest tightening with a mix of fear and excitement. "Are you sure?" I whispered. Searching his eyes for reassurance, he nodded, pulling me closer. "I've had enough of hiding. I don't care what anyone thinks. All I know is that I need you." Elizabeth, in that moment, it felt as though the world faded away, leaving just the two of us in the stillness of the night. Our lips met slow and tender, each kiss a silent vow, each touch a confirmation that we were in this together no matter what challenges lay ahead. The night felt enchanted, a realm separate from our daily lives. With each kiss, the hesitation melted, replaced by an undeniable sense of belonging. I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the warmth of his body enveloping me, our breaths. As we mingled in the crisp night air, the lake stretched out before us, silently witnessing the promises we were exchanging. He held me close in his hands, tracing down my back, pulling me into him. There was something raw and vulnerable in his touch, as if he feared this moment would slip away. He pressed his forehead against mine, murmuring, "I want this, Elizabeth. I want us." Hearing those words made my heart swell with an unguarded love. I kissed him deeply, pouring into him all the feelings I couldn't articulate. We remained entwined for hours, lost in each other's embrace, forgetting the world around us. After that night, everything transformed. We knew it was time to come clean to our family. The weight of our secret had become too much to bear, and we both longed for a life where we didn't have to hide. A few days later, we mustered our courage, deciding to tell my mom and Hudson together. As we stood in the living room, my hands clammy and heart racing, I glanced at Jake, who offered me a reassuring smile. We were about to reveal something deeply personal and precious. But just as I prepared to speak, there was a knock at the door opened. It was Caleb. He had returned. This time, he was determined not to let go so easily. My heart sank as he looked at us with a determined, almost desperate expression. "Elizabeth, we need to talk. I can't just let you walk away like this." I exchanged a glance with Jake, who appeared as taken aback as I was in that moment. The tension in the room felt unbearable. I knew I had to make a choice, one that would dictate the course of our lives. As Caleb stood there, his eyes filled with an intensity that made my stomach twist. I realized the secret I had been harboring with Jake. Come out now, or we would never be able to move forward. I glanced at Jake, his jaw clenched and fists clenched at his sides. He was holding back, honoring my decision, but I could see the struggle within him. Taking a deep breath, I turned to Caleb. "We need to talk, but not in the way you think," I said softly, hoping my voice sounded more confident than I felt. "There's something you don't know, and you deserve the truth." Caleb looked confused, glancing between me and Jake. "What's happening, Elizabeth?" he asked impatiently, suspicion tinging his voice. I took another deep breath, feeling Jake's presence beside me. "Caleb, things between us ended because my heart belongs to someone else." I reached for Jake's hand, and the shock on Caleb's face transformed from confusion to disbelief as he pieced it together. "You're kidding," he stammered, looking at Jake in shock. "With him, he's your stepbrother, Elizabeth." The room fell silent, the weight of Caleb's words hanging in the air, but I didn't waver. I held Jake's hand tightly. I felt a surge of strength as I faced Caleb's astonishment. "I know it sounds crazy," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper, "but it's real. We've tried to ignore it." Acting as if it didn't matter, I glanced at Jake, who nodded in agreement, his gaze steady, "But we truly love each other." Caleb stepped back, clearly grappling with his emotions. He looked hurt, and a part of me felt the weight of our shared history, but that chapter had closed, and now my heart belonged to someone else. "You don't have to understand it," Jake said quietly. Jake stepped forward. "But Elizabeth deserves to be with someone who genuinely loves her and brings her happiness." After a long, tense silence, Caleb finally nodded his shoulders. "If that's what you desire, Elizabeth, then I will not obstruct your path." He cast one last painful glance at me before turning and walking away, leaving me breathless and overwhelmed. In the days that followed, Jake and I felt a sense of freedom we had never felt before. The weight of secrecy finally lifted, and despite knowing the path ahead wouldn't be simple, we were ready to face it together. There were long, emotional conversations. Moments filled with shock and worry were shared with my mom and Hudson, but eventually they came to understand the deep bond Jack and I shared. Accepting that it was something we couldn't deny, our connection grew. Stronger with each passing day, Jake became my rock, my confidant, the one who truly saw and understood me. We filled our days with shared moments, laughing together in the kitchen as we cooked, having heartfelt late-night talks and enjoying the serenity of quiet mornings. Every glance, every touch, and every kiss reaffirmed what I already knew. Deep in my heart, this was where I belonged. Life would bring its challenges, and we knew the world might not always understand us. But I was confident that as long as Jake was by my side, we could overcome anything. We were no longer just step-siblings. We were partners bound by a love that overcame all odds, and one that I believed was meant to last. You for taking the time to listen to my story. It means so much to me that you've joined me on this journey. If you enjoyed, please remember to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories. Stories I can't wait to share with you.